if the US doesn't control the Strait of Hormuz, then it's clear that they have lost, even though it's already quite clear that they really misjudged this war and didn't prepare for it properly. The way that the US empire operates is by ensuring that the world transacts through the dollar. That's why the dollar is the reserve currency. It requires most people to trade, especially the petrodollar from the Gulf states. That's why it's called petrodollars, to transact the petrol in dollars. And what happens is that the Gulf countries, when they receive those dollars, they buy US debt, which makes it very cheap for the US government to borrow money, which therefore they can kind of build their military very cheaply, even though they don't have enough revenue generated through taxes. They get it through cheap debt because everyone, those trillions of dollars across the world, is trying to buy US debt, making US debt very cheap because there's a huge demand globally. That's the effect of the dollar being the reserve currency. If now Iran is saying that, hey, we're not going to allow any passage through the Strait of Hormuz if it's dealt in dollar, we want Chinese yuan to allow ships to transit, that is an attack on the US economy and the US government, because now that money that used to go to the US to buy US debt, US treasuries, they're not going to be able to do that because now it's in Chinese yuan. And so governments around the world are now going to hold more Chinese yuan than before and less US dollar than before. So that's a huge impact on the US economy and the US government. But on top of it, it exposes the limits of the US power. Now, everyone was being bullied by the US because the US is the superpower. It can dictate terms that are not beneficial for other parties because it can project power, whether that's through the Navy or through the Air Force. But now people are realizing that the US isn't as powerful as we imagined, because Iran, the country that has been under sanctions for 47 years, is destroying US assets. This tells a lot of countries that the US can't actually defend them. And it seeks governments around the world to seek partnerships less with the US and more with regional powers such as China, such as Russia, and now such as Iran. And remember, this is at a time where the US has attacked all its allies by applying tariffs on them. And now it's asking everyone, can you please help us open the Strait of Hormuz? We can't do it by ourselves. It's gone as far as asking Russia and China, even though Iran is allowing any ships that are going to China to pass. And in fact, it loves the idea of Iran imposing that those transits that are happening have to be denominated in Chinese yuan instead of the dollar. That strengthens the power of the yuan and moves us closer to a multipolar world where we're not relying on the dollar as a reserve currency, which also reduces the ability of the US to impose sanctions because it controls the financial system. And with it, that comes the ability to deny people the ability to access the financial system, which it has done to Iran and Russia. So in a way, Iran's now applying sanctions on the US, which is insane. But the problem is that Iran now dictates the terms. So any country in that region that wants to either import oil or export oil has to deal with Iran as the regional power instead of the US as the superpower.